The bass guitar is the groove section of the worship team. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's all about that bass, but a well-played bass guitar will get the congregation grooving better than any other instrument on the stage. Of course, for that to happen, it needs to be played well. If you are a bass guitar player or a worship leader who is trying to speak the bass guitar player's language and to give them direction, we're going to walk through some super helpful tips in today's Weekly Worship Thoughts. The fundamental frequencies for the bass guitar typically range from 41 Hz to about 165 Hz, or maybe 220 Hz depending on how you're playing the instrument. The bottom E rings at 41 Hz. If you're using a 5-string bass, your low B rings around 31 Hz, and that is really low. On the other end of the spectrum, most worship team bass players won't venture past the E note on the D string, which rings at 165 Hz, but some more advanced players may find their way to the A note on the G string, which rings at 220 Hz. All right, let's talk about the fundamental frequencies on a 4-string bass, standard tuning, and we're going to keep the numbers fairly simple. Instead of going into the decimals, we'll just kind of round it off. But an open E string here, the lowest string, the fattest string, is right around 41 Hz. That's really low. To get an octave up from that, you can go to the D string and the 2nd fret, which is also an E. An octave up means it's twice as many Hertz, so we're going to go from 41 to 82 Hertz. And this, by the way, is exactly what an open E on the electric guitar would sound like. It'd be the same frequencies, 82 Hertz. And now to get an octave up from that, you can go all the way past the 12th fret to the 14th fret. And once again, we've got an E on the D string. And 82 times 2, roughly 165 Hertz. And the same thing is basically true for the A string. The A is going to be 55 Hertz, and take an octave up from that on your G string 2nd fret as an A again. 55 times 2 is 110 Hertz. And so some bass players will actually go all the way back up past the 12th fret to the 14th fret where we have an A again. 110 Hertz times 2, 220 Hertz. So you can see that the bass guitar is definitely fundamental frequencies down low, but there's so many harmonics at play as well. With the bass guitar, there are a lot of harmonics in play. So while the fundamental frequencies are in the low range, most of the musical frequencies are actually found in the low, mid, and high mid range through the harmonics. Now, the soul of the bass will often be found in the 400 Hz to 800 Hz range, and the pluck or the attack may be anywhere from 1K to 3K. The bass guitarist's musical buddy is the kick drum. The groove of a song is often found or created by having the bass player pluck the notes of the chord progression identical to the pattern and the rhythm of the kick drum. The bass guitar essentially gives tonal expression to the kick drum. All right, so we've got our pocket drummer here again, so let's go ahead and listen in and hear what kind of beat he's given us. You hear that kick going boom, 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 boom. So now with the bass guitar, we're going to be able to accent that and give it tonality by really matching that kick. With the bass guitar, good dynamics are achieved by adding subdivisions between the kick pattern at big moments of the song. For example, if the kick drum is hitting on the 1st and the 3rd beat of each measure, then the bass guitar should also be plucking the notes of the chord progression on that 1st and the 3rd beat of each measure. In this case, they would both be playing half notes, and that works well for a verse, for instance. However, when the chorus starts, the bass guitar player can add dynamics or make the song sound bigger by switching to quarter notes and plucking the notes of the chord progression on every beat of the measure, even though the kick drum is still hitting on that 1st and 3rd beat. When the chorus is over, the bass player can then switch back to playing half notes to match the kick again, and this will essentially help to bring the song back down dynamically. All right, so let's listen in on our pocket drummer again, and let's try to apply this idea. Okay, our beat is boom, 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 boom. So for the verse, let's match that. And I think for our chorus, let's go ahead and get into eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Feel how that just made the song so much bigger? Back to a verse now. Now, while your plucking pattern may seem simple and repetitive, even boring to some bass players, it doesn't need to be played in the same position for the entire song. So a good approach to playing a song may include plucking the notes up the octave on the first and the second string during the verse, and then down the octave on the third and the fourth string for the chorus. So play around with how you think the song can best be musically communicated, and always listen to what the other instruments are doing. The bass guitar is almost never the lead instrument, but it can sure make a huge difference in the overall expression of the song. When the bass guitar is solid, the song just feels right. All right, so let's take this idea of playing the verse up the octave and then dropping down the octave for the chorus. We'll just use this same beat we've been using. Boom, boom, the verse. Let me match the kick for the last line of the verse. And now drop down for the chorus and or even with our eighth notes. And now back to an up the octave verse. All right, let's talk about bass runs and some of the more fancy playing. Bass runs can be a lot of fun and it really makes the song groove, but they should be used sparingly and intentionally, especially for a worship team. Bass players are notorious for getting bored, probably because they only play one note at a time and typically only use the bottom two strings. To counteract their boredom, an amateur bass player will fall prey to running amok all over the fretboard. This is bad. Don't do this. Now, admittedly, it can result in the bass player sounding really good, but the trade-off is that the band ends up sounding really bad. Because the bass guitar is being played all over the fretboard, it is imperative that the bass guitar player properly intonate their instrument. This means that they set the action and the string length to ensure that the open string and that same string held down at the 12th fret produce the same note, though obviously it would be an octave apart. Now, if this is not the case, it needs to be fixed. If this doesn't get fixed, all of the hairs on the back of your neck may rise up to give you the standing ovation that you deserve. Ain't nobody got time for that. So just to show you what that sounds like, your open E and your 12th fret E should be the same note. Same with the A and then the 12th fret A. Check that with a tuner. If those are not ringing at the same note, you do need to fix your intonation. Setting your intonation is a three-step process. And just real quickly, those steps are: number one, you want to make sure that your neck is straight. You can look down and see if that is the case or not. Step two, you want to make sure that your strings are the right distance from the fretboard. That's preference. There are certain measurements that most guitar techs go by, but for the most part, how close do you want the string to be? That sets your action. The third thing is you're going to want to set how long your strings are, and these are what are going to control that. If you are a bass guitar player, what was one interesting truth or idea that stood out to you about your instrument? And how do you think that truth or idea will help you in the future? If you are not a bass guitar player, what did you learn about how to effectively communicate with the bass guitarists in your worship team? In your own words, how would you say the bass guitar fits into the typical worship music pie? How big of a slice should it get? What is its main role in a typical worship team setting? How does the bass guitar typically fit into your own worship team context? Do you think you typically give it too big of a slice, too small of a slice, or just right? Given the information that you just received, What do you think is the #1 thing that individual bass guitarists in your specific worship team context should work on in order to improve the overall quality of the worship team as a whole?